If a single no turned your whole family on you, you and John have something in common. Today, we step back in time to feel what it was like for John to grow up with a dad like Frank, the hands-on, sideline shouting dad who was all in when there was uniforms, lights, and cheers. But watch what happens when one quiet fall night, John says, "I don't want to play anymore, Dad." The warmth in the house goes completely cold and the memories stop. To this day, John can't remember hanging out with his dad, spending time with him, learning about life after he hung up his sports gear. Instead, he learned a very hard rule as a young child who still needed his dad's love. Be easy, don't be too much, and maybe you'll get some of that love back. Once John went away for college, he had no idea why he didn't want to return home. His dorm mates went home on the weekends to visit their family, but John had no desire to visit a place where he was made to feel like he didn't matter. But watch what happens when John finally gets his dad's attention back. Not for who he is, but because he's about to make Frank a grandpa. In the living room, when John and Morgan announced that they were pregnant, Frank heard a second chance. A second chance to be center stage, to have a kid run up to him and look at him like he's the hero. And things were good for years. Sure, it was painful to have Frank around so much, but John was still trying to gain his approval. And he could only see one way to do that: allow Frank complete access to the twins until the unimaginable happened. John sticks to a parenting decision based on a teacher's recommendation, and the little warmth he got from Frank completely evaporated. On that porch, that fateful day, just imagine now knowing what he went through as a kid when Frank tried to push through John and enter Morgan and John's home uninvited. When John stood nose to nose with his dad, all he wanted was his love back. And he saw in his dad's eyes like they just went black as he became his dad's enemy number one. John was born on a warm summer night in 1993 to childhood sweethearts Frank and Elaine. He's the eldest of 4 kids, a curious, outgoing kid who just loved to be outside and with his dad. And when John was little, time with Frank was abundant. Frank was the kind of dad who would get off work, grab John, grab the gear, and they would spend the evening before Elaine called them home for dinner, hitting balls at a local park. Love was spelt with sports, tiny cleats, and t-ball. Frank was the loudest on the sidelines, and at first it was the greatest feeling in the world to have your name called out by your dad, like across the field. But as John grew, Frank's expectations changed. No longer was it enough to show up, do your best, have fun. Frank expected John and his little teammates to be superstars. And when errors were made or the ref made a bad call that Frank didn't agree with, he would get in the ref's face in front of the crowd. John would stand on the field, staring at the parents whispering in the stands, watching his teammates kick dust because they were just annoyed by the spectacle, and he would just beg the field to swallow him whole. The rides home were no reprieve. Frank would run through every single mistake John made, telling him, "You have to do it differently next week." And if there was daylight left, John was expected to skip dinner, go in the backyard, and practice drills with his dad. On the fall night when John said it so soft to his dad because he didn't want to hurt him, "I don't want to play this season," the room didn't explode. It just got cold. Frank didn't argue. He just walked away and started pouring his time into John's siblings, who still fed his need to be adored and applauded. Frank literally disappeared from John's world. He would get off work and do the same routine with Mindy now, or if Mindy wasn't an option, Frank would just be off helping a widowed neighbor who called him a hero. Here's what that void felt like for John. The house just keeps humming along. Dishes clinking, TV noise in the background, laughter in the other room, but John feels completely invisible. When he brings home a perfect score on a paper, it just sits on the counter until it curls. No one asks him about it. He also learns, and this is heartbreaking, to keep his story short because the eyes in the room start to drift to the clock. This is what abandonment feels like when it's not loud. When the person you love and who used to shower you with so much attention now just looks through you. John lost his innocence right there. He thought a parent's love was guaranteed, but early he learns that if you stop feeding dad's need for praise and adoration, you stop being enough. John does what every kid does who still deeply craves and needs a parent's approval. He tries to earn the love back by bringing home perfect grades, showing his dad cool things he found in the woods, and he never tells his dad when kids start to bully him because he thought, "Oh, that'll just give him another reason to hate me." He tries to be the easiest kid, and he waits for Frank to say, I'm proud of you. That day never comes when John's a kid, nor does it come when John's a man or a father himself. Elaine, John's mom, orbits around Frank, just like she did when she was a little girl, scared of her mother because Frank felt like her protector, just like her trucker dad did. Her whole life is dedicated to making Frank's life easy. Out in public, John would be corrected if he didn't sit up straight by his mom, if he didn't look into the wind so his hair didn't get messy. And John always knew that Frank's mood, that's what determines the household vibe. If Frank was upset, everyone else was upset. Nothing mattered more to Elaine than Frank. When little John went to his mom to cry after Frank stopped paying attention to him once he quit sports, he felt her arm slip off his shoulders. And she said, "John, you are so selfish. Your dad dedicated so much time to you to improve you because that translates into success when you're an adult. And now you don't want those teachings. So he's taking those lessons to your siblings. You're not the only kid, John." In that moment, he learned, okay, I'm going to have to figure some stuff out myself. Like, I have no ally here. The only person in his corner was his grandma Ray, who he frequently stayed weekends with and days with on the farm. But here's the heartbreaking thing. He would realize when he came home, after staying several days away from home, no one even knew he was gone. Jumping ahead to adulthood, after college, John did not want to move back to his hometown where his entire family still lived. He would often hear terrible stories from his sister Mindy, who bought a home 3 blocks from their childhood house, where Frank would enter daily to fix things, whether she wanted him to or not. If she wasn't praising him enough, he would leave in tears, making her feel awful for wanting privacy. It was just a mess. He also saw another pattern where Frank and Elaine would often pay for things for the siblings, but then they would expect to control their lives. Again, something John didn't want any part of it. It just felt so heavy. So he told himself, don't accept anything because there's always strings attached. Over time, John just started to feel like a guest in his own family, but he was always there to help when they needed to vent, when they needed advice. He would get pulled back in when people needed him because he wants to be a good kid. He wants to be a good brother. He wants to be a good son. But what he doesn't realize is the only way for him to feel anchored in this family is still by performing. It's different, but it's still performance. No one ever has shown him love just for being him. Now he's a grown man, a dad, and married to Morgan, and they have built a home that they needed when they were kids. Lots of family time, safe limits, and a home where feelings are definitely welcome. Ever since he and Morgan announced that they were expecting, John's parents became extremely attentive. It was like John got his old dad back. They would stop over just because, bring meals, extra treats for the kids, and they would really encourage John and Morgan to go out. You go have a life, focus on your marriage, don't become just parents. And they were happy to foot the bill for the date night. They would watch the kids. Elaine would clean the house. I mean, it literally felt like a dream, but deep down, John didn't trust it. He felt that strange discomfort. Again, like, my dad's only here because there's something he can get from me. It wasn't because he was here just for John. But the money, it was tight. John swallowed his worries, didn't say much. He just supported the involvement. Years tick by, and John does his best to swallow his resentment as he is disrespected nonstop in his own home. When his parents are there, he tries to say no or set a rule with his kids. His dad will undermine, override, or act like John never spoke the words at all. Morgan begins to feel suffocated, resentful, but keeps, that bright, welcoming smile. But after each visit, John and Morgan start to debrief just to reassure each other, we're not crazy. This actually happens, but they don't do anything about it because John is scared of losing that little bit of warmth that he has again from his dad. Then comes the day when they sit in those tiny plastic chairs in the second grade room and the teacher tells them her concerns about Carter not following the rules and pushing Blake around. John is so confused about the teacher's insight, about him and Morgan not being on the same page. I mean, they pride themselves on being a hands-on family. They are on the same page about everything. Well, except for Morgan's Amazon addiction, but everything else. So when he leaves the school, he's at a complete loss. Like, he sees himself in Blake. He sees his dad in Carter. He sees the kids that bullied him also in Carter. But he doesn't really know what to do. Pulling into his cul-de-sac, seeing his dad's orange Jeep parked in the driveway, it all comes together. His dad runs on no rules, and really, when you think about it, the twins spend about 50% of the time with Grandpa Frank. So the teacher was spot on. John feels his heart just in his throat, imagining having to have a talk with his dad, and he can't even think about losing him again. So he stuffs him down and he tries to avoid the conversation. But then Elaine texts about a sleepover. He has no choice to come clean. He has tried to set limits before and he's ignored, but now there's a teacher involved and Carter is out of control and Blake is feeling bullied in his own home. So he doesn't flinch. He grabs the phone, sends the message. But what he doesn't know is what we all know. No one in his family has ever said no to Frank. Ever. We've seen what happens next, how a mother turns her back on her own son to protect her protector, a story twist that blasts out to the whole family that's so outrageous they have no other option but to come and attack, how a father comes nose to nose with his adult son as he tries to force past his doorframe because access to him is what makes him feel safe again, how 1-star reviews appear from names no one recognizes on Morgan's flower shop, and John feels like he's going crazy. He tries repeatedly to articulate with heartfelt emails and receives a one-stamped answer. When can we see the kids? And that pain he feels every single time he gets that response is the same pain from his childhood when his dad said, "You don't matter to me if you don't perform." Now he's hearing the same thing. "You don't matter to me. Move aside and give me your kids." And just like when he was a little boy, crying to his mom that he missed his dad, he learns again, nobody comes before Frank in Elaine's eyes, not even her own kids. He feels completely abandoned, again by his dad, but now by his mom. Here's how depression sets in for someone like John. Inside his house, he is holding two heavy things at once that is tearing him in two. He's trying to protect his boys, and he's trying to protect his history. So he's trying to be a good dad, and he's trying to be a good son on the same day, and that is just too much weight to carry. At night, he tries to turn to games to push that image of Frank's black eyes looking at him on the porch to stop the noise, the spinning. So he stays up too late. He sleeps in through his alarms, misses deadlines, says I'm fine when he's totally not fine. He goes quiet when Morgan tells stories because he's slipping underwater. He is becoming a shadow. He isn't angry, he's devastated. He feels like he's walking around with a funeral going on in his lungs. He's still trying to show up, go to work, fix the leaky sink, read to the boys, pretend that everything is okay. But then there's one quiet moment in the hallway after bedtime. Morgan hands him a glass of water and she says, "You can't keep carrying this alone." He nods as if he was waiting for someone to give him permission to get help. So he stays up late again, not to game this time, but to search for a therapist. Scheduling was actually really easy, just puts in his information and he starts to count down the 6 long days. He sits in the waiting room that smells like coffee and lemons, stares at a giant spider plant that needs some trimming, feels a mix of embarrassment and tries not to throw up when a stranger across from him asks, "How can I help you?" The story just comes out in one long piece, and for the first time, he's sobbing. Not the kind he swallowed on the field when the bleachers watched his dad scream at the ref, but the kind that's been jammed shut for years. The therapist names things that have been chewing on his ribs. Loyalty binds means that family picks a side or they make you pick a side to keep the peace. Triangulation means that people use a third person to fight so they don't have to face each other. Emotional immaturity means some adults can't sit with the shame, so they change the story to feel okay. And for the first time in months, John's shoulders drop because someone is finally naming out loud what his body already knew. That's where we're going to leave John right now, with a paper cup in his hand, a boundary map waiting on the table, and Morgan about to join him in that room. Because coming up, we're going to draw a fence around this family that keeps love and safety in the same yard. We'll mark the holidays that still hurt with the silence only estrangement can give. And then we'll watch the teacher's notes turn from "we need to talk" to "Carter helped his table today. He sat through the whole lesson without being redirected." And later, we're going to be invited into 2 more meetings. One, just with John, Morgan, and the stranger now who feels like their angel guide, to learn how to heal without an apology. And then we're going to come back for a second meeting in that beige room with those 4 chairs where they'll sit across from Frank and Elaine, where reconciliation actually has a chance. In the next episode, the therapist will ask Morgan to join in so her and John can learn about emotional immaturity, boundaries, and how to draw their boundary map. I'll see you in that meeting.